Hey everybody, welcome to the Multiply Podcast. My name is Jared.
My name is David.
So glad you guys are with us. Dave, what's up, man?
Doing well. January, New Year.
Yeah.
What's your New Year's resolution? What are you doing?
Well, I think you know. And
Both of us.
I think it's pretty clear by looking at me that I'm really succeeding. Get in shape.
Yep.
You know,
What do you do?
Lose the pounds.
What do you do to try to get in shape? What's your
My
strategy?
wife and I do Weight Watchers.
Oh.
Yes.
And that's point system.
Point system, yep. You got a little tracking on your app. You do your whole thing. So
Yeah.
we're doing good so far.
Good for you, man.
Yep. I'm down 56 pounds. No, I'm just kidding.
I just watch my carbs. So no sugar, basically, no pasta, no rice, no bread, no.
You love your bacon.
I do love my bacon. I'm not doing keto, but I am
okay.
staying away from the carbs. And what I miss most when I go no carb is like Asian noodle dishes. Like I was in Nebraska this past weekend speaking at a conference. Quick shout out to all the Chi Alpha people that listen in. And we went to a pho place for lunch, it's a pho place, a Vietnamese restaurant. They sell pho, and I had to get it without noodles, which is still good. Like the broth is great, and I get a lot of meat in there, and I throw a lot of bean sprouts in there, but it still just is like
It's not the same.
So noodles and dumplings. Dumplings maybe even more than noodles, actually. I love dumplings, and when I'm not eating carbs, that's what kills me. But eating carbs will kill you too. So one way or the other.
Well, listen, we got to be committed if we want to get those 6-packs by this summer.
That's right.
Which has been our goal for the last
41 years.
Yeah.
For me.
Yep. It needs to happen. This is the year our wives are going to be rewarded with us getting 6-packs. So
I don't know if they care.
Well, they're not going to turn it down. But no, it's good to be back, man. Good to be recording. We're excited. If you're listening, you can also find us on YouTube. You can watch as well, and excited about that. Excited about the new year, and excited to jump into our topic today.
Yeah.
I was reading a Forbes article. It's actually a couple years old, but I thought it was interesting. They talked about different 8 qualities of great leaders, great leadership. And so we thought over the next 2 podcasts, we'll kind of break those down, take 4 and 4, share some thoughts. Now, obviously, this is not from a Christian perspective or a church perspective, so it'll be interesting to kind of look at each one and see, do they still apply?
Yeah.
What are our thoughts on it? So you want to jump us into the first one?
Yeah, I think the first one that they talk about in the article is the idea that great leaders have a sincere enthusiasm about them. And I think it's an interesting place to start. Personally, I'm an optimistic person, but I'm not like a high energy person. I don't know if that I'm a charismatic, like rah, rah, rah sort of leader. I'm a little more like just kind of slow and steady in my leadership. So this was challenging for me to see like that they identified this, maybe not, I don't know if they're listing it number 1 as it was the most important, but it was the first one on their list, and it kind of jumped out at me, this sincere enthusiasm. I think the adjective is as important as the noun, right?
Yeah.
So enthusiasm is energy and excitement, passion around what you're leading and related to who you're leading and the vision of what you're all about. But if it's not sincere, which means authentic and comes across in a way that doesn't seem forced or hyped or unnatural, then I actually think it can be very detrimental to be around a leader who's super enthusiastic, but nobody actually thinks it's for real.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. And there's different levels or displays of enthusiasm, right? Because I'm kind of like you. I'm not the screamer, shouter, run around guy. But
except for when you're watching sports.
That's true. There's one exception.
Yeah.
But I do have enthusiasm in certain areas, and when I'm enthusiastic about those things, like it's visible, it's evident, you can see what it looks like. And so I think one of the keys is to not mimic other people's enthusiasm and think like
their expression of their enthusiasm.
Their expression, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what it looks like. Okay, so when I preach or teach or when I'm leading a board meeting or staff, I've got to talk in this way or I've got to show or act like this or else no one will think I'm excited about it. I think you're right on. The first part of those 2 words, sincere, is the key. Because if it isn't authentic, it actually backfires on you.
So what does sincere enthusiasm look like for you? Like if I were to ask your team, how do you know when Jared is really excited about something? You're not yelling, screaming, running around. What would they sense?
I think you can. There's still a sense of passion in my tones as I'm speaking, a sense of urgency, um, a sense of like it's typically something I've really thought through. I think, and so I can communicate some important details. I can communicate, like maybe anticipate some objections or anticipate some concerns that people would have, and saying, "Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm wanting to do," and so there's a pretty visible, even though it maybe not be the running, shouting stuff, there is definitely a visible level of excitement. But I think also the preparedness, the thought through, all that kind of stuff.
I've seen you're just fully engaged when you're passionate about something. You're not distracted.
Right.
You're not like how you're with your family, like on your phone all the time, not giving them any attention.
I was gonna say most of the time I'm talking with you.
Yeah.
It's hard. There's a lot of games on your phone. It's tough.
Lots of clans to conquer or whatever it is. So if you're listening in, one thing that you could be thinking about for yourself is, what do I look like when I'm enthusiastic, and how does my team or the people around me perceive my enthusiasm? And is my enthusiasm in line with my personality and the way God has wired me? And, in this day and age, you can access so many other preachers and leaders online that when you see a high energy preacher express their enthusiasm in a certain way, like a Furtick or a Judah Smith, and you're like, oh man, that's what I need to be. But then you try it, and everybody's like, that's not you.
It was that weird phase that you had where you were trying to preach like T.D. Jakes.
Yeah. Somehow I knew that's your example.
It was just a little weird, We're in Syracuse, New York, and
right. It's trusting who God made you to be, right? It's trusting what's on your heart to say, and it's also consistency with your team in such a way so that they can recognize the enthusiasm in your life. I have the opportunity this year to be a part of a leadership cohort with a lead pastor in Springfield, Missouri named Jim Bradford. We call him Dr. Jim. And recently in one of our cohorts, he shared with us 12 thoughts on leadership. And the first thought that he shared was that leaders genuinely believe that they can change the world. And when he started there, again, like with this list, I was kind of like, what? I mean, I'm an incremental growth sort of personality. Like, that's my thing, like steady incremental growth. And the idea that, like, it challenged me because I thought, do I really lead in a way that, like, I believe what we're doing can make a significant difference in this world? Mm-hmm. And when you believe that and you buy into that, whatever you're leading, whether it's in a local church or whether it's a company, if you're bought into your vision and somehow making the world around you a better place, and you believe that, I think enthusiasm follows that. So I think enthusiasm sometimes is the result of buy-in to the vision of what you're doing. Enthusiasm, we can't just manufacture that because we know we're supposed to have it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's jump to the second one, which is integrity.
Yes.
Now, this is kind of my sweet spot. Maybe something we're working with you on it, but no, obviously this is interesting because remember, this is a non-Christian perspective,
right.
But
share. So what do you think they mean when? I don't mean like they and us, but people who aren't necessarily thinking so much about walk with Christ, integrity.
Yeah.
What do you think the corporate world thinks when they look for a leader? When they use the word integrity, what do you think they're talking about?
Yeah, I think someone with character, someone who does what they say.
Yeah.
Someone who's not backbiting, who's not pitting people against each other, but is a person of upstanding character. Yeah. And that applies outside of the Christian world, of course.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a Christian to have great character,
Yeah.
So
somebody who I think, like you said, follows through on what they say, and then has your back, doesn't hang you out to dry. I think great leaders, publicly they praise, privately they confront, and I think great leaders know how to take the blame for a team failure, but know how to give the praise for a team win.
Yeah.
And, there's so many ways that you can process success and failure as a leader that either strengthens the way the team views your integrity or tears it down, in the way that we are. And I even think like integrity and like, obviously integrity ultimately is who we are when nobody else is watching, right?
Yeah.
Not how are you perceived, which is your reputation, but who actually are you? And it has a way of actually playing itself out. I think, we've seen both in the church world and in the corporate world that when there's a lack of integrity in an individual or in a business, they may succeed for a time, but a lot of the time, eventually the sort of cracks in the foundation begin to be exposed in certain ways, and then you begin to realize like there's no integrity in this person. There's a discrepancy, and I think we all wrestle with the fact that none of us are quite who we think we could be or should be, and even as Christians, we're always growing and we're all in process. But this idea that there's even just a lack of self-awareness, and for the Christian, a lack of repentance around those discrepancies, and rather there's an embracing of it and even a hiding of it to give ourselves an advantage in our leadership. That's where I think a lack of integrity really comes back to hurt us.
Yeah, and in the Christian world and pastoral leadership world, I think it's essential. When I think of integrity, is two things that really come to my mind. Is one, am I aware and real with other people about who I am, and my insufficiencies when it comes to my pursuit of integrity. As much as I want to pursue being a person of integrity, I so much lack, and no matter how much you grow, you're still going to have so many weak points. So am I in touch with that? Am I real about that? Or like you said, do I kind of leverage the perception of me to my own benefit?
Or make excuses or hide it or blame others?
Right. But then the other thing I think is key in this is, do I intentionally put people in my life that can help my integrity grow? Because that is such an essential key factor, I think, to someone having integrity, is that they care about having a greater level of integrity. So the only way to do that is to have community around you who can challenge you, who can push you, who can call you out on stuff, and so I think that's another sign. If you don't have that, then there may be a blind spot there.
Yeah. So I think leaders, some of the questions to ask yourself when it comes to this idea of integrity and leadership is, do I follow through on what I say I'm going to do? Is there consistency? If I say we're all about something, do I actually live that way? In the church that we both go to, that I serve at, we're preaching through James right now, or I'm preaching through James right now. And this Sunday, we're going to be in the famous passage about faith without works being dead. James is bringing out this idea that, like, you can say that you believe, but ultimately saying you believe, but with no action flowing out of that belief, actually reveals you don't have real belief to begin with, and it's not saving faith. That's his whole argument. Not that we can work our way in, but that our works ultimately reveal what we really trust in, or who we really trust in.
Yeah.
Same thing in leadership. Like, you can say that you're all about excellence, but if you do terrible work, or you can say you're all about teamwork, but if you hang your team out to dry, or we're all about trust, but you don't open your life up to anybody on your team, then what you're doing actually speaks a lot more. And another question to ask yourself is, do I expect of myself the same things that I expect of the people on my team? I'm holding them to certain standards as it relates to work ethic and engagement, and quality of work. Do I ask those things of myself? And is there a system in place where I can be held accountable, like you're saying, not just people that can speak into my life, but even some sort of a system where even the top leader gets reviewed for the quality of the work that he or she is doing. And I think those are important things for us to wrestle with, because ultimately, I think it's Craig Rochelle who says at most of the end of his podcast something along the idea of, like, it's better off being a real leader, because people would rather follow a leader who's real than a leader who is, I forget how he says it, but basically a leader who seems great, but everybody knows he or she is not the real deal. It really undermines your leadership.
Yeah, that actually sounds like something that we've said on this podcast.
Well, Craig has been known to borrow heavily.
He copies a
from
lot of stuff.
If you listen to the Multilight podcast and then you go listen to his next one,
honestly, Craig, stop.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
Speaking of integrity.
But if you want us to come on your podcast, we will. All right, we're going to jump into the third one, which is great communication skills. Now, before I get your thoughts on it, one of the things they said in here, they highlighted three things I thought were interesting as it pertains to communication skills. One was the ability to motivate. One was the ability to instruct. And the third was the ability to discipline, which I thought were kind of, especially for Christian circles, when you hear great communication skills, immediately your mind goes to preaching. but of course their perspective is very different. And so I thought those three: do we have the ability to motivate? Do we have the ability to instruct? And do we have the ability to discipline in a way where we're communicating effectively? So as you kind of hear, well, let's start with the first one, motivate. What comes to your mind when you're thinking about how do we have good communication skills in that area?
Well, I mean, I think as a leader, one of your biggest tasks is getting from point A to point B and getting the team to go with you, right?
Yeah.
So you're motivating them in the sense of where we're headed, but you're also motivating them to work together to get there. So there's layers of motivation with leadership. You're motivating individuals because not every individual is motivated by the same things, right? And that's why lazy leadership tries one size fits all motivation. Doesn't work.
Yep.
Because not everybody has the same vision of the good life. Some people are going to work just to get a paycheck. Some people are going to work because they want to make a difference. Some people are going to work because they want their voice to be heard. Some people are going to work because they want a higher position. Right? Everybody's got different. So getting to know the people that are on your team allows you to motivate them more specifically to the way that they're wired, and allows you not just to motivate them, but also even to, as we'll get to in a minute, confront and discipline them in ways in which those same motivations are maybe leading them into the wrong sort of behavior. So there's that individual motivation, but you also got to motivate them to work together as a team towards a common goal.
And that takes communication skills.
Right. Yeah. It takes interpersonal, one-on-one communication skills.
Right.
It takes the ability to communicate to a larger group in one setting in a way that pulls everybody in. And those are very specific skills. And so when you think of like what are the primary gifts what are the primary qualities of someone who can communicate with someone well one-on-one, what are some things you think of?
I think of a great listener. I think of someone who is self-aware, someone who knows that person. So obviously the more you know the person, I think the better communicator you can be to them, because you can pick up their signals better. You can have a better understanding of what they're trying to say to you. Therefore, you can anticipate what they're thinking, kind of what their issues are, what their struggles are. And so much of communication is that, right? It's saying, I'm having this conversation with you, and I can kind of know maybe where you're thinking or going. So let me anticipate that. And if there's worries you have, I'm going to help dispel those worries or fears. Or if there's things that I need to encourage you in because I know it'll really jazz you up, I can say those in a way that's effective for your personality and your and who you are, so.
And I think like knowing that you've been heard, right? So being able to ask good questions towards the end to make sure that they're walking away because it would be nice if communication was done when we said our piece. Yeah. But that's only half of it. Communication hasn't really happened until the other person has actually heard what you intended for them to hear.
Right.
And so many times people walk away from a conversation and one side thinks they said something, one party thinks they said something, and the other party thinks that something else was said. And unless you wrap your conversations up with clarifying questions, and it can be even as clear as, what did you hear me say? Or what do you take away from this? Or what do you think my primary concerns are? What's the next step for you? Like if you don't follow up with those sort of questions towards the end, there's a chance that they walk away. You're just trying to encourage them to lean into the team more, and they walk away feeling like everybody hates them,
Yep.
So I think that's a really important part of it. Then when it comes to speaking to a group, it's a little bit of a different skill set, I think, because you're speaking to a broader audience all at once. I think being tremendously clear and concise is important in those environments. Filtering out and editing out unnecessary information and commentary, and being able to pull the room in on the front end with some sort of a laying out of what's at stake. Like, hey, this is why we're together. This is what really matters, and this is why what I'm about to say really matters. Then be able to be as concise and clear as you can, communicate those things in a gracious, clear, compelling way, and then being able to provide some sort of a next up. So listen, here's what I want to do is after this meeting, I want to schedule meetings with each of you, or after this meeting, I want you to each email me back and let me know what your takeaway is from the meeting. And so that these things don't just sort of become these like, I think of The Office and Michael Scott always pulling his team into the conference room. All they would have to yell is conference room, and they all would just get up from their desk.
That sounds awesome, though.
Yeah.
I always want to be in one of those meetings.
Well, if he was running it, I would want to be there. But then you think of like
Yeah.
Stanley's always doing a crossword puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And Angela always wants to get back to work. And
Yeah, they're not productive. That's
no,
for sure.
they're definitely they're very far from productive. They're highly entertaining though, and but most workplaces it's not that extreme.
Yeah.
But you do get that sense where like every time the leader calls for a meeting, everybody rolls their eyes because they think this is a waste of my time. There's more important things I could be doing.
Yeah. I think two things I think about when I think about communicating effectively to a larger group is the ability to read the room, and I think a lot of people miss this, but it's kind of similar to preaching. Like you've got to be able to, when you're communicating to a group of people, be able to understand. Have I lost them? Am I losing them? Have I gone too far? Is it time to segue? Because you typically prepare something and you think this is going to be great, but you've got to be able to pivot on the fly if you're losing them, because if you lose them, then they're not hearing anything at that point. Or this isn't resonating. This is coming off in a way I didn't intend. Okay, let me shift to a different. I think that's a really important skill set. And I'm not sure exactly how to develop it other than to say you've got to be more aware and looking for signs, cues, body language, all of those type of things as you're communicating. I think the more you try to do it and attempt to get better at it, the better you will, And then also just with that, creating culture in all of your meetings as they build upon each other.
Yeah.
So what is the vibe? What's the culture you've created when you meet together with your staff or with your group of leaders at your business or whatever? And over time, you will create a culture that people will become accustomed to, either good or bad.
And clear, consistent language helps create culture, right?
Yeah.
So in your communication, know what your language is to communicate specific values and just keep hammering it home over and over and over. It's important in leadership. And I think there has to be a level of empathy in your communication too.
Yeah.
I'm not just standing above you, sort of pontificating all this information or all these mandates, but really I'm coming alongside you. I think it's Tim Elmore in one of his books talks about how this generation is not looking. What does he say? They're not looking for a sage on the stage. They're looking for a guide by their side. So not somebody who can just get up there and wow them, but somebody who can actually walk with them. And that's why I think in this day and age of, we have access to so many resources to help us learn, right? So YouTube has all these how-to videos, how to make this dish, how to fix this car issue. And so I think even in leadership and in our companies and in the churches that we lead, people are looking for someone who can sort of be that voice that walks with them through stuff. And I think that communication to people in crisis and chaos, in struggle, having that clarity, encouraging, empathetic voice is such a big deal.
Yeah, we'll move on, but real quick, when you said empathy, I thought that's so important because I've been in meetings where I've heard leaders say, and this is not to say that these leaders are not also going through real struggles, but if you don't have empathy and understand where the people are at that are in the room, I've heard leaders get up and complain about the challenge that they're having to how stressful it is to own a home. Meanwhile, in the room is all staff people who could never afford to own a home and would love to do that. So it's not to say that stress isn't real, but you got to know in that room, no one's going to empathize with you. They're going to go, are you kidding me?
It's tone deaf, right? I mean, that's kind of how I describe that sort of communication. It's accurate, it's true, it's maybe even helpful, but it's totally tone deaf.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So... cool.
All right, the last of our four for this episode is loyalty. And loyalty is something that I think underrated.
Yeah.
I when I talk about leadership, when I travel around and talk about leadership sometimes, I say one of the most underrated characteristics of leadership is just showing up. And, if you lead long enough, if you're in church long enough, you realize like, you eventually just don't take it for granted anymore because people don't always show up. They're not always dependable. I know dependability and loyalty are not the same thing, but there's like some commonalities there. And I think loyalty as a leader is loyal in all directions, right? So it's loyal up to the leaders that you're under, careful with how you speak about your leaders, careful about the way that you support their vision and their dreams and come alongside them. But it's also loyal down, that there's a loyalty to the people that you're leading. And I'm a huge, we've talked about this before, I'm a huge soccer fan. And one of my I'm a Liverpool fan, and one of my least favorite coaches is a guy named Jose Mourinho. He's a great coach, but I don't like his antics. I don't like the way he does things, and he's coached a lot of teams that are Liverpool's rivals, which doesn't help. But one thing I do give him credit for is like one thing he does, and other coaches do this too. When his team's had a really bad game or they're really going through a tough time, he has a way of like drawing all the attention to himself. Like he will he'll create drama just to pull the attention of the media off of his players' performance, so that they don't have to bear the weight of it, and they're all just talking about what Jose said or what he did or going off on the refs or making some crazy comment that makes no sense. Like, and I think he's brilliant in a lot of ways. And I'm not just saying being manipulative in that way, but I do think there's a way in which leaders show loyalty to those that they lead, that they bear the weight sometimes in place of those that are quote unquote underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so there's something powerful when you're in a staff meeting with someone who works underneath you, and someone brings to attention an error that they made, and you know it's their fault. And in that moment, they're looking and going, okay, am I going to get thrown on the bus? And rightly so. I probably deserve it. And you as a leader step up and go, that's totally my bad, my fault completely. And then, of course, you probably have conversation or have already had conversation. Like, there is something about that speaks to that leader that says, we're in this together. I've got your back. And we don't want to continue to make mistakes. But at the end of the day, like, I'm in this fight with you. And I want what's best for you. That speaks volumes. And so
I think loyalty is birthed out of appreciation, and so if you are second chair, third chair on a team, having a real appreciation for the privilege that you have to work on that team, having appreciation for the amount of trust that your leader's giving you. I think, I don't mean to kind of throw the younger generation under the bus, but the truth is that they have access to so many opportunities. They have quicker access to more opportunities than we ever had, right? So finding jobs, getting your resume out there, I feel like there's definitely research that's been done that shows that there's a certain age group that doesn't hold jobs down for very long, and a lot of it is because there's so many other places that will hire you.
Yeah.
And while that may be opportunistic and sometimes even the right move for an individual, it also definitely short circuits loyalty, because ultimately you just become loyal to yourself and loyal to your own needs. And I think if you have an appreciation for, like, if there was only one job left in the whole world and you got it, you would be loyal because you'd be appreciative that you got it. So I think if you're leading on a team underneath a leader, whether you agree with everything he or she does, whether you even love everything about what you're called to do or asked to do, the appreciation that you can work, that even God's given you the ability to do the work that you're doing, and you have the opportunity to work and provide for yourself and your family, that can be a real catalyst for loyalty. Now, if you're leading from above, how about a deep appreciation for those who are serving underneath you, a deep appreciation for those who are following you and have committed themselves to support the vision that you have or to come alongside and help craft that vision. So I think if you don't appreciate really the opportunities you have in leadership, you won't be as loyal as you should.
Yeah. Well said, man. And it's no mistake. I think you're right that our culture in general is moving less and less away from deep, meaningful friendships and more to superficial kind of connections, and which makes loyalty even more challenging. So I think the further we go, the more important that will be in leadership.
Yeah, and I just want to say how glad I am for how much you appreciate me. And
I want to appreciate the fact that you recognize my appreciation in your appreciation of my loyalty
and
to
I
you.
recognize that you are afraid of how much you love me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it scares me a little bit, yeah. Hey, before we go...
we got 4 more in our next episode, right?
4 more, yes. Yeah, we'll come back in our next episode with 4 other qualities. But before we go, our heart, we don't want to make just better leaders, but also better eaters. And so, David, tell us, David's Eats, what's the best thing you've had in the last few weeks?
Wow. Well, I was just in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is a great... I don't know if it's called a city. I guess maybe it's a city. It's built around the University of Nebraska. And when I was there, it's a college town. It's got some good food. I don't think I really found the best food there, but I'll just say probably the best thing I had while I was there. There's a little Mediterranean place there. it's called Sultan's Kite. Sultan, like like a leader, Sultan, and then kite, like the thing you fly in the air. Sultan's Kite. I think that's how it's pronounced. And I use DoorDash every night after the services because I was always hungry to order in a Greek salad and some chicken shawarma or some lamb gyro meat, and it hit the spot. I love those flavors. I know you do too. I love the sort of briny, acidic, olive, tomato, feta. I love all of that, and all that together, chicken shawarma on top of a Greek salad. My mouth is watering thinking about it. So that's probably the best thing I ate on that trip.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. If you're watching via YouTube, give us a like, subscribe. We look forward to hanging with you guys next time. This is the Multiply Podcast. Peace.